Hi everyone. As he said, I'm Simon Briggs from SUSE. Sadly, I apologise for that horrific photograph. The marketing team like to stress who we are when they build our slide decks out. So it's always very horrific seeing a 10-foot picture of yourself on screen. But I work at SUSE in Europe, Middle East and Africa as the strategist around particularly our OpenStack solutions. I work with the sales field team, so I work a lot with our Dutch team that's sat over in the corner over there. And I work on many of the large projects in Europe, Middle East and Africa and feed the information back from the field into our corporate organization to make sure that the decisions from a central point of view take into account the true needs of our customers, be they in Holland or Germany or Saudi Arabia, are wanting to achieve when they're driving forward in that cloud situation. So that's me, a quick explanation. Apologies from Alan Clark from the OpenStack community. He's a SUSE employee. He normally does his keynote. He couldn't make it this year. He asked me to stand in. Very sorry. But quickly focusing in on something more general rather than OpenStack, we'll take a different slant to the more technology-led conversations that you've already heard, partly because we were third in the succession, and a lot of the subjects are core subjects to the OpenStack community, but also the fact that SUSE want to celebrate something this year and are doing so. So this month, 25 years ago, SUSE was created. We are the oldest open source organization still working as a corporate, and we are very proud that it's our 25th birthday. And as such, I do have a cake. It looks a little bit small when you're all sat out in the crowd, maybe. But the reason why it's small is we bought many of these cakes, and they're over in the coffee area for you guys to enjoy with your coffee after my boring session about technology. So please enjoy on SUSE a bit of happy birthday time. So are we all going to sing together happy? No, I'm only joking. I'm a British guy. I'm not confident with things like that. So let's talk about OpenStack. And really at a time of a birthday, we all get a little bit nostalgic and we think to what's gone on before. And obviously, OpenStack's journey is relatively recent. It is actually only 7 years old. It had a birthday itself very recently. I don't know if anyone knows when OpenStack officially began, but it was early June, 7 years ago. My son's 8. He's actually older than the thing I work on. That's quite freaky for a 47-year-old, but that's true. It was obviously begun by NASA and Rackspace. That's a very famous thing. And when it first started, like all things that are born, it was quite small. The first conference took place, the first summit for OpenStack, in Texas, I think, in the autumn of that year. And 250 people attended. Something like 60 companies were represented, maybe 18 countries they came from. So it was very small. And actually, at the time, there was many open source solutions and thought processes about how they would cope with the challenge. So OpenStack exists because of a reason, and the reason's been talked about already. But it's quite important we focus down on that reason. And the reason was, as operators, you as a community understood that we could no longer deal with IT services in this very artisan method of building single blocks and presenting them up whenever we were asked to do something. It was too slow, too laborious, and not efficient. At the time, 8 years ago, cloud scale as a concept was starting to begin, and certainly when NetApp was talking about data at scale, that ultra demand in our communities now for cloud scale technology resource is the reason why people started to think towards OpenStack. And like all open source projects, there was other competing ideas, other groups formed, so Open Nebula, Cloud Stack, Eucalyptus, and SUSE was sat there trying to decide what it was going to do. It spoke to the analysts, Gartner, for instance, their view on it at the time was it's a science project. So it's the kind of maybe comment that was coming back from the analysis of whether you should design a product. But SUSE actually early on decided to back it, and we're very proud. We not only were the first organization to define a distribution of Linux, but we were the first organization to commercially take to market a distribution of OpenStack. It was on the Essex release, it was in 2012, and because of the timing, we were able to help the OpenStack community form their foundation, on which they have grown massively over time. So looking back at that time, there were tiny numbers involved in the OpenStack community. Some of you may have been in Austin, which was the last summit that OpenStack did, where the design summit and the commercial summit were joined together. I was lucky enough to go there. By the way, big thumbs up to Austin. It's a fantastic place to visit if you ever get a chance. I love live music, so it was really good fun. I was very thankful of OpenStack getting me there. But when we were there were 7,500 people or more. Okay. That covered 1,190 organizations from above 80 countries in the world were represented. Now, what does that matter to you as consumers of OpenStack? What matters is that is the largest community of development and advancements available to you around cloud. Nobody else, no private company is able to bring that amount of energy and power into a single solution set that's available to you. And that's really why open source is the Borg. We are absorbing the world. We took over Unix, we're taking over cloud, we're moving forward, and it's a fantastic thing that luckily SUSE chose to invest upon. But let's not get boring and look at the past. Let's talk about the present. Again, a call out to my marketing teams. They've been really clever here. So you'll all know, learning English, that you can use multiple definitions of a word in English, and obviously they've done present because it's our birthday. So the idea of this presentation is I say, OpenStack is a present. Let's look in the box. Very cheesy. But OpenStack can be seen as a present. It's a fantastic capability. Its breadth of power now has grown, so the core components of OpenStack are very established now. They've been used in many, many organizations, very mature, very powerful, and they're able to take your organization forward. Around those, there's been many projects, some have been mentioned earlier today, which add more functionality into the tooling. But ultimately, what is OpenStack able to do? And I'm keying into the canonical presentation here saying, essentially, OpenStack is available to you to orchestrate all the needs of your data center at cloud scale. You can't do cloud scale without software definition of the resources that you require to deliver out the services to your customers. So you need an arbitration layer. You need an orchestration layer that allows you to bring those services together, the service components, and drive them out. And ultimately, that is what OpenStack is achieving for you. Okay? So SUSE is very happy that we've invested in that. But there are challenges around the OpenStack community. Some of the clouds you might have noticed yesterday as you were flying in from London first thing in the morning, that some clouds are quite black. And the wind can be a bit turbulent as well. My plane was doing this all the way down into Schiphol. But on the horizon with OpenStack today, there are some challenges. The first one is certainly the feedback SUSE get and the OpenStack community get and other players in the market are getting is often it feels too complex. So we have to carry on working around the projects that simplify the technology. Canonical have got answers to that. Other vendors have answers to that. And certainly making OpenStack consumable and a solution that you can build on has been a key thought process for SUSE. So we don't actually, and sometimes I freak my customers out when I tell them this, but I'm not bothered about turning the people I'm selling my solution to into experts on building clouds. That's not what they want. They want to be experts on delivering services on clouds that work for the organizations they work in. So we as an organization try and smooth that journey as much as possible. And certainly the OpenStack community have got to work in there as well with us to make that consumption model better. It also means it has to be resilient. We talk a lot about production over OpenStack now, excuse me. But for it to be production, it has to be highly available. The individual instances or components that are driving your service are indeed cattle. Sorry if you don't like the analogy, but it should work in Holland with all the farming you've got. So they are indeed cattle. You shouldn't care about them intimately, but actually the service is still a pet. So we need to make sure that the platform we're building is very resilient. We need to put a lot of work around that. And certainly upstream and in the particular vendors, you've got some very cool work being done around those capabilities, scaling out your solutions to work across resilient data centers, working on the region concept to make it very resilient and powerful for you as service providers into your organizations. With complexity comes other challenges. It was talked about earlier with the cultural challenge that you get with cloud. Actually, Jonathan Bryce has stood on many a platform. He's stood here and spoken, I think, and talked to the OpenStack community about how software is actually a small part of this journey. So moving to cloud scale is a cultural challenge for organizations, and we need to get better at being able to translate what it means to them culturally and hold their hand when they work through that process. And that's why Fairbanks, Canonical, SUSE, Red Hat, all the players in this market are working so hard at helping our organization partners to go forward in the environment. Because when you virtualize a data center, it's complicated. It's not an easy thing to do. And to change your thought process away from, I own everything, I control everything, it's all mine, and take that control away and give someone the click of a button to a resource pool, that's a cultural challenge as well. So as a community, we have to bear that in mind when we're working with our customers and our community organizations. Another thing is education. If any of you are managers of teams driving out OpenStack, in England we use the joke, OpenStack engineers are a bit like hen's teeth. I don't know how many of you have seen teeth on hens, but I've not seen any. So there's not many OpenStack engineers who are worth their salt who are available in the work market today. They've already been employed, so it's a very competitive market. And when you add the complexity on the back and the skill shortage, you've got a challenge as an organization. So certainly the OpenStack community has to get better at educating. They have to simplify and educate. SUSE's helping in that process. You may not realize, but SUSE has an education program which is fully ratified by the OpenStack community. If you take SUSE's education, you can either take the SUSE exam at the end or the OpenStack exam as an engineer or consultant. And certainly he's got good take-up. So at Austin, the last big summit that OpenStack's driven, we actually had 4,000 people sit in seats during our training. Yeah? That's an incredible amount of rollout, and certainly we would encourage OpenStack to drive forward. But coming back to the real value, I've focused a little bit on the challenges, but let's not get hung up about the challenges. Let's actually think about the fact that what we've done is astronomical in 7 years, taking cloud scale to private cloud in organizations. Yes, public cloud's an important factor, and certainly SUSE has a massive business in the public cloud area. But actually in private cloud, OpenStack has really been a wonderful vehicle for us as an organization and our customers. And certainly it will be a core pillar of technology for SUSE moving forward. So talking about moving forward, what's going to happen? Containers are going to happen, absolutely. Canonical are absolutely right in investing understanding and time around containers. In 2 years' time, I think the profile of the people saying they're working with containers will change. because they offer so much power and ability. And certainly within the OpenStack community, we've got to keep driving the innovation to allow a situation where bare metal, so the idea of tin through Ironic or other functionality being brought up and available through your cloud orchestration layer. VMs, obviously Nova's been driving those for not many years, but lots of years in the OpenStack terms. And of course, the containers must be available too to complete that story so you don't end up with siloed technology which is independent. Because if we allow containers to run as a complete silo from the rest of IT, we've got the same problem we always had. We've not learned from the challenges previously. The whole reason why we wanted to go to cloud scale was we wanted to move away from these islands of technical ability that don't work together. So it's important we stay open. It's important we work with containers and add more technology, but we also need to be open about hardware. Certainly, people need more than just Intel chips. There is other technology around there, and their use cases need them. Think about HPC now moving to cloud. It's the buzz of the town. HPC on cloud, that seems like madness. Surely HPC is a defined infrastructure block that you drive speedful solutions through. Well, no, cloud is on HPC. Because of these challenges, the scales that you're talking about, big data analytics with big data, then maybe things like ARM chips need to be technology in your compute layer as well. So there's an area that we need to expand into and we need to do much work on, and SUSE is going to be announcing things in that space fairly soon. I don't know if you know, we've got a big conference in Prague in the next week or two. Watch the press. We will be announcing quite a lot of things. Certainly, platform as a service was mentioned earlier. Development via containers in a rigid fashion. Cloud Foundry, very strong OpenStack, open source community project, and SUSE is very invested and working hard in there. So Ceph as a storage solution, Cloud Foundry on the top, openness to other vendors such as NetApp. You can plug in your storage capabilities very easy through SUSE or OpenStack Cloud. All these things will be key moving OpenStack forward. So thank you very much for your time. I am going to be available during the day at the booth. We've got a couple of sessions where we speak. Come along, speak to us. If you are actually going to make it down to Sydney, I volunteered. It didn't seem many people wanted to do the journey, but I've never been there. So I volunteered to be in Sydney in a few weeks' time with the OpenStack Summit. So if you're there as well, come over, say hello. I love to talk cloud, whether you're a SUSE customer or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You're obviously very optimistic. OpenStack is taking over the world, or
absolutely.
But
well, it's taking over the private cloud data center side of the world. There is a public cloud as well.
Yes, I heard about it. You also mentioned a few challenges. We're going to discuss them in the panel later, also, especially culture. So I don't want to mow away all the grass, as we say here in Holland. But you said it might tend to get a little too complex, and you said we need good people to manage the stuff. They might become scarce. Is that a risk?
Yeah, absolutely. Anything that's complex where there's a skills shortage can be perceived as a risk, but markets are very good at filling risk. So all that happens, Linux seemed tremendously complicated when I first got into Linux. You build your router, we were all compiling kernels, it was all something for the dark arts hiding down in the bottom of the basement. But now it's a commodity that people just flash up and use. Really, the encouragement there I was talking about is we need to get as familiar with this technology as we are today with Linux for it to really be the powerhouse moving forward. And we have to keep our eye on that ball.
Yeah, that was my who keeps an eye on it. But does the community do that
organically? The foundation drive a lot of that thought process, and certainly this is SUSE's thinking. I've been talking about a little bit of Simon Briggs, but a lot of SUSE. And Alan Clark represents us in the OpenStack Foundation. And so we're all as vendors are feeding in this kind of energy into the community. But that's the great thing about open source. It does self-police. If there no longer is a need, then the open source community fades away.
So
whilst there is a requirement, it drives, it builds, it gets better.
So we trust the mechanism on that.
I do.
And we also heard from Chris, I think it was Netflix,
Yeah.
that the developer becomes head of the department, or maybe the CIO. So I think
you are seeing
that's
it
a tempting.
everywhere.
Yeah.
You are seeing it everywhere. So we work a lot with the very big industry organizations, power industry organizations, and there's very few automotive organizations that perceive themselves as car builders anymore. They think of themselves as delivering data centers on wheels. So it's starting to change
the new
everywhere.
heroes. Yeah.
Not everyone's becoming a software company, but nearly everyone's becoming a software company.
Okay. That's a good quote to end with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Cheers.